My girlfriend said I was predictable and settled for me until someone more exciting came along, so I gave her exactly what she wanted by making someone else my priority instead. The moment I realized what I'd become was sitting in my Portland apartment at 2 a.m., surrounded by thousands of dollars worth of camera equipment I'd bought for Luna's travel blog while she texted someone else during what was supposed to be our quiet evening together. I'm a 31-year-old data visualization specialist for a renewable energy consulting firm, the kind of guy who finds patterns in spreadsheets genuinely fascinating and thinks a perfect Saturday involves hiking forest park trails followed by craft beer tastings and meaningful conversation about everything from urban planning to documentary photography. My work involves creating compelling visual stories from complex environmental data, helping clients understand carbon footprint reductions and sustainability metrics through interactive dashboards and infographics that actually make sense to normal humans. I'm methodical by nature, someone who researches restaurant reviews before making dinner reservations and maintains detailed spreadsheets for household budgets and travel planning, but I'd never considered these traits boring until Luna made me question everything about my personality and approach to life. When I met Luna at a tech networking event 18 months ago, she seemed like everything I wasn't but desperately wanted to be: spontaneous, creative, full of wanderlust and big dreams about traveling the world while building her brand as a lifestyle influencer and adventure travel blogger. She was 27 with sun-bleached hair from constant weekend trips to the Oregon coast, always wearing flowy bohemian dresses that looked effortlessly chic but probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, carrying vintage film cameras and speaking passionately about capturing authentic moments and inspiring people to live more adventurous lives through her visual storytelling. Luna had this magnetic way of making everything sound like an epic adventure, from grocery shopping at the farmer's market to checking the mail, and I was completely enchanted by her infectious energy and seemingly boundless ambition to create something meaningful through storytelling and visual content that would inspire others to embrace uncertainty and seek authentic experiences. Within 3 months of dating, I was buying her professional camera equipment because she mentioned her iPhone wasn't capturing the image quality she needed for potential Instagram partnerships with outdoor gear companies, then a high-end drone for aerial landscape shots, then expensive editing software subscriptions and a new MacBook Pro because her old laptop couldn't handle the file sizes from her upgraded equipment. Every purchase felt like a smart investment in our shared future, supporting someone I loved while she built something genuinely meaningful, and Luna always made these financial needs sound temporary and reasonable, just until her follower count reached the next growth milestone or the next brand collaboration deal materialized and started generating consistent income that would make her financially independent. The pattern became my normal existence without me fully recognizing how one-sided things had become. Luna would get excited about a creative project or content series, need specific equipment or financial support to make her vision reality, and I'd automatically figure out how to provide whatever she needed because seeing her genuinely happy and passionate made me feel useful and important in ways my regular corporate job never did. I planned thoughtful dates entirely around her content creation schedule, taking her to scenic locations she could photograph for her blog, researching hidden waterfalls and dramatic viewpoints across Oregon and Washington, even learning basic photography techniques so I could help with her shoots when she needed an extra pair of hands to hold reflectors or adjust lighting equipment during golden hour sessions. When Luna struggled with creative blocks or dealt with harsh comments on her posts from internet trolls, I became her primary emotional support system, listening for hours while she processed her complex feelings about authenticity versus commercial appeal and the constant pressure to produce engaging content that would attract brand partnerships while maintaining artistic integrity. But despite my constant investment and support, the relationship felt increasingly unbalanced in ways that made me question my own worth and relationship expectations. Luna consistently canceled on my work events, claiming social anxiety around my corporate colleagues or saying that professional environments drained her creative energy and made her feel inauthentic, missing important company gatherings including my annual conference where I received a recognition award for innovative data visualization work and several dinner parties where I'd hoped to introduce her to my mentor and close colleagues who were curious about the creative partner I'd been mentioning. The most painful example was when my mentor Dr. Richards passed away from pancreatic cancer after a 6-month battle, and Luna skipped his memorial service for a brand collaboration photo shoot with some trendy wellness company, texting me that it was a potentially career-defining opportunity with a tight deadline that simply couldn't be rescheduled around my personal obligations or emotional needs. I sat alone in the back row of the funeral home, listening to colleagues share stories about Dr. Richard's profound impact on sustainable technology research while processing both profound grief and sharp disappointment that the person I'd supported through countless creative crises couldn't prioritize being present during one of the most emotionally difficult moments of my professional and personal life. That evening marked something fundamental shifting inside me, the dawning realization that someone who truly cared about building a life together would have found a way to support me during such a significant loss. But Luna apparently saw my mentor's death as merely an inconvenience that conflicted with her content creation schedule and potential income opportunities. I stopped asking myself whether I was being too sensitive or demanding too much, and started wondering if I'd been so focused on supporting her dreams that I'd forgotten to notice whether she actually cared about mine. The shift became obvious when Cole entered the picture, though I didn't recognize the warning signs until it was too late to address them effectively. Cole was Luna's college roommate from art school, a freelance photographer and self-proclaimed adventure documentarian who specialized in capturing extreme outdoor experiences for athletic brands and travel magazines, the kind of guy who posted Instagram stories from remote mountain peaks with captions about pushing boundaries and living authentically in the wild spaces that modern society had forgotten. He contacted Luna through social media about 6 months into our relationship, ostensibly reconnecting after years of minimal contact, but their rekindled friendship quickly began dominating every aspect of our time together in ways that made me feel like an outsider in my own relationship. Luna's entire demeanor would transform whenever Cole texted or called, shifting from whatever mood she'd been into animated excitement that felt completely different from how she responded to my attempts at meaningful conversation or emotional connection. She'd excuse herself from dinners we'd planned to take his calls, disappearing for 30 or 40 minutes at a time while I sat alone with cold food, listening to her laugh in ways that sounded more genuine and spontaneous than anything I'd heard from her in months of trying to support her creative endeavors and emotional needs. Their text conversations became constant background noise during what used to be our quiet evenings together, Luna's attention fracturing between whatever show we were watching and the steady stream of messages that would light up her phone with Cole's name, each notification causing her to grab the device with an urgency that suggested these conversations held more importance than anything happening in our shared physical space. The content of their exchanges remained mysterious, but Luna's reactions told me everything I needed to know about their emotional intensity. She'd smile secretively at her screen, type lengthy responses that required both hands and complete focus, occasionally laughing out loud at things she never felt compelled to share with me despite my obvious curiosity about what could be so consistently entertaining. Weekend plans became increasingly complicated as Luna started scheduling what she called creative collaboration sessions with Cole, disappearing for entire Saturday afternoons or Sunday mornings to work on undefined projects that somehow always required complete privacy and couldn't accommodate my presence even as a silent observer or helpful assistant. When I asked about these sessions, Luna would offer vague explanations about brainstorming new content directions or exploring artistic concepts that required intensive focus, but her descriptions never included concrete details about what they were actually producing or how these collaborations might benefit her blog or brand partnerships that I was helping finance through equipment purchases and living expenses. The projects seemed to exist in some ethereal creative realm that was too sophisticated for my practical, corporate mind to comprehend, despite my genuine interest in understanding and supporting her artistic growth in whatever ways might be most helpful to her long-term career goals. Cole's influence on Luna's content became increasingly obvious as her Instagram posts shifted to feature more adventure photography, extreme hiking locations, and philosophical captions about authenticity and creative courage that sounded distinctly different from her previous writing style and seemed designed to appeal to a more rugged, outdoorsy audience than her original lifestyle brand had targeted. She started posting photos that Cole had obviously taken, though he was never credited directly, showing Luna in dramatic natural settings that required serious hiking experience and expensive outdoor gear, often wearing outfits that looked professionally styled for maximum visual impact against rocky cliff faces and pristine wilderness backgrounds. The captions began featuring phrases about adventure soulmates and creative partnerships that felt pointed and deliberate, as if Luna was communicating something specific to an audience that didn't include me despite my constant presence in her actual daily life and financial support of all the equipment making these elaborate photo shoots possible. These posts received significantly more engagement than her previous content, with Cole himself leaving thoughtful comments about artistic vision and authentic living that generated dozens of likes and responses from followers who seemed to recognize him as some kind of creative authority worth admiring and emulating. I noticed Luna would check these comment threads obsessively, refreshing the app multiple times throughout the day to see how Cole had responded to other people's reactions, and whether his insights had sparked additional conversation about creativity, adventure, and the courage required to live an authentic artistic life. The dynamic felt intentionally exclusive, designed to showcase a creative partnership that operated on a level I was supposedly too conventional and risk-averse to understand or appreciate, despite my willingness to financially support Luna's artistic ambitions without asking for credit or recognition in return. When I gently questioned whether Cole's increasing prominence in her content might send confusing messages to her followers about our relationship status or create professional boundary issues, Luna became defensive and accusatory, claiming that I was being possessive and small-minded about her artistic collaborations and professional networking opportunities. She insisted that Cole understood her creative vision in ways that I never could because we came from completely different backgrounds and approached life with fundamentally incompatible philosophies about risk, adventure, and authentic self-expression that made meaningful artistic collaboration impossible between us. According to Luna, my corporate career and methodical personality made it impossible for me to appreciate the deep creative bond she shared with someone who lived as fearlessly and artistically as Cole, whose nomadic lifestyle and commitment to documenting extreme experiences represented everything she aspired to become as an artist and influencer seeking to inspire others through visual storytelling. Cole had apparently traveled through Southeast Asia documenting indigenous mountain tribes, spent months photographing wildlife in remote areas of Patagonia, and built his entire brand around the philosophy that true creativity required constant movement, calculated risk-taking, and rejection of conventional social expectations about career stability and financial security. These adventures sounded exotic and impressive, but I couldn't help noticing that Cole's social media presence suggested someone who was constantly seeking sponsorships and brand partnerships to fund his lifestyle, rather than someone who had achieved genuine financial independence through his artistic pursuits. Much like Luna's own struggles with monetizing her creative work despite years of effort and substantial equipment investments. The anniversary trip to Santorini was supposed to be our moment of reconnection, a carefully planned celebration that would remind Luna why our relationship mattered more than whatever creative partnership she'd developed with Cole. I'd been secretly saving for 8 months, setting aside money from every paycheck and bonus while researching the perfect Greek island experience that would capture Luna's sense of adventure while giving us uninterrupted time to rebuild our emotional connection away from Cole's constant digital presence and her obsession with content creation. I booked a luxury cave hotel carved into the volcanic cliffs of Oahe, the kind of place Luna had posted about dreaming of visiting someday, with a private terrace overlooking the Aegean Sea and direct access to the famous sunset views that attracted photographers and influencers from around the world. Beyond the accommodation, I'd planned sunset sailing excursions around the volcanic islands, private wine tastings at family-owned vineyards that had been producing Assyrtiko grapes for generations, cooking classes focusing on traditional Cycladic cuisine, and guided tours of ancient Akrotiri ruins that would give Luna plenty of opportunities for the dramatic photography she loved while creating meaningful experiences we could share together. The total cost represented nearly 4 months of my disposable income after covering Luna's regular expenses, but I convinced myself this investment would demonstrate my commitment to supporting her dreams while prioritizing our relationship in ways that might help her remember why we'd fallen in love originally. When I revealed the surprise during an intimate dinner I'd cooked at my apartment, complete with Greek music playing softly in the background and printed itineraries showcasing all the research I'd done to make this trip perfect, Luna's initial reaction seemed genuinely excited and touched by the effort I'd put into planning something so thoughtfully tailored to her interests and aesthetic preferences. She examined the hotel photos with apparent delight, commenting on how the cave architecture would create incredible natural lighting for photography, and seemed particularly pleased about the wine-tasting experiences that would allow her to create content around Greek island culture and local culinary traditions that her followers would find inspiring and aspirational. But within minutes of expressing this enthusiasm, Luna became distracted by her phone buzzing with what turned out to be messages from Cole about his recent breakup with some long-distance girlfriend he'd been casually dating while traveling through Central America, and her attention shifted completely away from our anniversary plans to providing emotional support for someone whose romantic drama somehow took precedence over our celebration. I watched her type lengthy responses to Cole's messages while the printed itineraries sat forgotten on the table between our dinner plates, her excitement about Santorini fading as she became absorbed in whatever crisis required her immediate emotional investment and creative problem-solving skills. Over the following days leading up to our departure, Cole's breakup became the dominant topic in Luna's daily conversations, with her spending hours on video calls helping him process his feelings about relationships and artistic authenticity, often while I sat nearby trying to finalize travel logistics and coordinate with the Greek vendors who were preparing our customized experiences. Luna would update me periodically about Cole's emotional state, explaining that he was struggling with feelings of creative stagnation and existential loneliness that required careful support from people who understood his artistic temperament and commitment to authentic living, making it clear that his emotional needs were more urgent and complex than anything related to our anniversary trip or relationship maintenance. 3 days before our scheduled departure, while I was organizing our luggage and reviewing the detailed schedule I'd created for our week in Greece, Luna casually mentioned that Cole had always dreamed of photographing the Santorini sunsets for his portfolio, describing how the volcanic landscape and dramatic lighting would provide perfect opportunities for the kind of landscape photography that could elevate his professional reputation and attract new clients for his adventure documentation. She suggested, with the innocent tone of someone proposing a minor itinerary adjustment rather than fundamentally altering our romantic getaway, that Cole might join us since he was going through such difficult emotional trauma from his breakup and could benefit from the healing power of travel and creative inspiration that the Greek islands were famous for providing to artists and photographers seeking authentic experiences. When I hesitated, pointing out that this was supposed to be our anniversary trip and that having a third person along might change the entire dynamic of what I'd planned as an intimate celebration of our relationship, Luna immediately framed my reluctance as selfishness and emotional insensitivity towards someone who was genuinely suffering and needed support from friends who cared about his well-being and artistic development. She reminded me that Cole had been there for her during various creative crises and professional disappointments, suggesting that loyalty and friendship required reciprocal support during difficult times, especially when someone was questioning their entire approach to relationships and creative authenticity in ways that could potentially derail their career and personal growth. During this conversation, Luna also revealed, almost as an afterthought that felt deliberately casual, that she and Cole had shared what she described as an intimate moment during their college years, but she immediately dismissed it as meaningless experimentation that had no relevance to their current creative partnership or her commitment to our relationship. The revelation hit me like cold water, not because of jealousy about ancient history, but because of how she'd hidden this information for months while insisting their connection was purely professional and artistic, making me question what other details about their relationship she'd conveniently omitted during all her defensive speeches about my possessiveness and lack of artistic understanding. Luna continued by praising Cole's spontaneous nature and willingness to embrace uncertainty, contrasting his adventurous approach to life with what she characterized as my predictable stability and tendency to overplan experiences rather than allowing them to unfold organically in ways that might lead to genuine surprise and authentic discovery. According to her perspective, Cole represented the kind of creative courage and willingness to take emotional risks that she found inspiring and necessary for her own artistic growth. While my careful planning and financial investment in our relationship demonstrated a conventional approach that prioritized security and control over the kind of authentic experiences that truly creative people needed to thrive and produce meaningful work. Luna's dismissive response about bringing Cole on our anniversary trip created a moment of absolute clarity that cut through months of self-doubt and emotional manipulation I'd been too invested to recognize clearly. Sitting in my apartment that evening, listening to her rationalize why my romantic gesture needed to accommodate her creative partnership with someone she'd been intimate with in college, I experienced something that felt like waking up from a dream where I'd been convinced that my own perceptions were fundamentally flawed and unreasonable. The patterns suddenly became impossible to ignore. Every time I planned something meaningful for our relationship, Luna found ways to minimize its importance or redirect the focus toward Cole's needs, treating my emotional investment as less valuable than whatever artistic collaboration or personal crisis required her immediate attention and creative energy. I realized I'd been participating in my own diminishment, accepting Luna's framing that my practical approach to love and life made me inherently less worthy of priority than someone whose spontaneous lifestyle and artistic temperament supposedly represented a more authentic way of existing in the world. That night, instead of arguing with Luna about boundaries or trying to convince her that our anniversary trip should remain private, I made a decision that felt both calculated and liberating in ways I hadn't experienced since the early months of our relationship when I still believed I was building something mutual and sustainable. I quietly transferred Luna's airline ticket to Zoe Chen, my colleague from the renewable energy consulting firm who had always been a supportive friend and fellow adventure enthusiast, someone whose company I genuinely enjoyed without feeling like I needed to prove my worth or apologize for my personality and professional choices. Zoe was a brilliant environmental scientist who specialized in sustainable tourism impact assessments, exactly the kind of person who would appreciate both the cultural significance and ecological uniqueness of the Greek islands without requiring expensive equipment purchases or elaborate content creation setups to enjoy the experience authentically. When I explained the situation to Zoe over coffee the next morning, carefully omitting the more painful details about Luna's emotional manipulation while focusing on my desire to share an amazing travel opportunity with someone who would genuinely appreciate the experiences I'd planned, she was both surprised and genuinely excited about the prospect of exploring Santorini's volcanic geology and traditional agricultural practices. Zoe had been working on research related to sustainable wine production in Mediterranean climates, making the vineyard tours and local cuisine experiences particularly relevant to her professional interests, and she offered to split the costs despite my insistence that I'd already budgeted for the entire trip and wanted to share these experiences with someone whose company I actually enjoyed without constant emotional tension. Her enthusiasm felt refreshing and uncomplicated in ways that reminded me what it was like to plan adventures with someone who appreciated thoughtful preparation rather than treating it as evidence of creative inadequacy or fear of authentic living. Someone who could engage with new experiences without constantly documenting them for social media validation or using them as material for building a personal brand around lifestyle inspiration. I spent the following days packing methodically and arranging final travel logistics while maintaining a deliberately normal routine with Luna, who remained absorbed in providing emotional support for Cole's breakup recovery and planning whatever creative projects they intended to pursue together in my absence. Luna seemed to assume that my quiet acceptance of her Cole proposal meant I'd eventually capitulate and modify our anniversary trip to accommodate their artistic collaboration, occasionally mentioning details about what equipment Cole might bring or how his photography expertise could enhance the content opportunities that Santorini would provide for her blog and Instagram presence. I let her continue these assumptions without correction, responding with non-committal sounds when she described Cole's excitement about Greek island landscapes or his appreciation for my willingness to include him in what he apparently understood to be a creative retreat rather than a romantic celebration. The night before our scheduled departure, I left a deliberately vague note on Luna's dresser that simply stated I'd handled the travel arrangements and she should check her email for updated flight information, without specifying what those arrangements actually involved or mentioning that her ticket had been transferred to someone else entirely. I packed my luggage with the same careful attention to detail I'd used when planning the original trip, including the hiking gear and camera equipment I'd intended to share with Luna, plus some additional items that I thought Zoe might appreciate based on her professional interests and outdoor recreation preferences. My flight departed early enough that I could leave for the airport while Luna was still sleeping, avoiding the confrontation that would inevitably occur once she discovered that her romantic partner had taken another woman on their anniversary trip instead of accommodating her request to include her former intimate partner in our celebration. I felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation as I loaded my luggage into the rideshare car, knowing that Luna would discover the ticket transfer during online check-in later that evening and would likely spend the next 24 hours frantically calling and texting while I enjoyed the peaceful process of traveling to Greece with someone who actually wanted to be there with me. By the time Luna realized what had happened, I was already sitting in the airport departure lounge with Zoe, both our phones switched to airplane mode, discussing the geological formations we hoped to explore and the local wines we were excited to taste without any obligation to create content or document every moment for social media consumption. The decision felt simultaneously impulsive and carefully considered, exactly the kind of balanced approach to life that Luna had criticized as boring and predictable, but which now felt like the foundation for experiences that could be genuinely meaningful rather than performed for an audience of followers and creative collaborators who treated authentic moments as raw material for personal branding and professional networking opportunities. Santorini with Zoe became a revelation about what companionship could feel like when both people were genuinely present for the experience rather than treating it as content to be captured and monetized for social media validation. From our first morning watching the sunrise over the Aegean Sea from our cave hotel's private terrace, I realized how exhausting it had become to constantly navigate Luna's need to document every moment for her followers while simultaneously managing her emotional reactions to whatever creative crisis or coal-related drama was dominating her attention span. Zoe approached the island with the curiosity of a scientist and the appreciation of someone who understood that some experiences were valuable precisely because they couldn't be reduced to Instagram posts or blog content that would generate engagement from people seeking lifestyle inspiration rather than genuine connection with the places and cultures they encountered. We spent our first full day exploring the dramatic volcanic cliffs and ancient settlements of Akrotiri, where Zoe's knowledge of geological formations and sustainable agriculture practices added depth to experiences that Luna would have approached primarily as photo opportunities for her travel blog rather than chances to understand the complex relationship between human civilization and environmental adaptation over thousands of years. Walking through the preserved Bronze Age city with someone who could explain the engineering innovations that allowed people to thrive in such a challenging landscape felt infinitely more meaningful than holding reflectors while Luna posed against scenic backdrops for content that would disappear from her followers' feeds within 24 hours of posting. Zoe's enthusiasm for the traditional wine production methods we learned about during our vineyard tours reminded me what it felt like to share genuine interests with someone rather than constantly trying to make myself useful to someone whose passion projects required financial support but never seemed to include space for my actual personality or professional expertise. During our sunset sailing excursion around the volcanic islands, Zoe and I discovered shared interests in sustainable tourism development and environmental conservation that led to hours of meaningful conversation about our respective work and long-term career goals, discussions that felt natural and engaging rather than forced attempts to bridge incompatible worldviews about creativity and authentic living. I found myself relaxing in ways I hadn't experienced in months, no longer walking on eggshells around someone whose mood could shift dramatically based on social media engagement metrics or Cole's latest message about his artistic struggles and emotional needs, no longer competing for attention with a phone that buzzed constantly with creative collaborations that somehow always took priority over our shared physical presence. Zoe had brought a professional camera for the trip, but she used it to document the geological features and traditional architecture that interested her scientifically rather than staging elaborate lifestyle shots designed to project aspirational content to an audience seeking inspiration about authentic living and adventure travel. Her approach to photography felt refreshingly purposeful and unpretentious, capturing details that mattered to her personally rather than images calculated to generate maximum likes and comments from followers who viewed her life as entertainment or motivation for their own travel fantasies. We discovered hidden beaches accessible only by hiking rugged coastal paths, where Zoe's outdoor experience and physical fitness made her an ideal companion for adventures that Luna would have avoided because they didn't offer the kind of dramatic scenic backdrops that translated well to social media content or provided obvious opportunities for brand partnerships with outdoor gear companies. These secluded locations became spaces for conversations about our respective dreams and concerns without the constant interruption of notification sounds or the need to document everything for public consumption, allowing us to connect over shared values about environmental responsibility and professional fulfillment that had nothing to do with building personal brands or attracting social media influence. One evening while we shared a bottle of local Acertico wine on our hotel terrace, watching the famous Santorini sunset that attracts thousands of tourists and influencers seeking the perfect shot, Zoe mentioned how refreshing it was to experience such a beautiful moment without feeling pressure to capture it perfectly or create content that would validate the trip's value through external engagement metrics. Her observation crystallized something I'd been struggling to articulate about my relationship with Luna, how I'd gradually learned to experience our adventures through the lens of their social media potential rather than their personal meaning, always conscious of whether our activities would generate the kind of content that would advance Luna's career goals and satisfy her followers' expectations for inspiring lifestyle documentation. That night, as we planned the next day's exploration of traditional villages and local artisan workshops, I realized I'd been settling for emotional crumbs from someone who saved her genuine enthusiasm and authentic self for creative collaborations with Cole while treating me as a reliable source of financial support and logistical assistance for adventures that she ultimately shared with someone else. The contrast between Zoe's straightforward appreciation for my planning efforts and Luna's constant criticism of my predictable approach to life made me understand that the problem wasn't my personality or professional choices, but rather my willingness to accept treatment that made me feel inadequate for being exactly the kind of person who could create meaningful experiences through careful research and thoughtful preparation. As our week in Santorini progressed, I found myself genuinely looking forward to each day's adventures without the underlying anxiety that had characterized my travels with Luna. No longer worried about whether my enthusiasm for historical sites or local cuisine would be dismissed as boring compared to whatever spontaneous creative opportunity might arise from Cole's latest inspirational message about authentic living and artistic courage. Zoe and I developed an easy rhythm of shared decision-making about activities and dining choices that felt collaborative rather than one-sided, with both of us contributing ideas and preferences that shaped our experience in ways that honored both our interests and the unique opportunities that Santorini offered for cultural exploration and natural beauty appreciation. While Zoe and I were discovering ancient wine caves and swimming in secluded volcanic beaches, Luna's world was imploding in spectacular fashion thousands of miles away in Portland. I learned about her airport meltdown through social media the next morning, when Zoe showed me a viral video that one of her environmental science colleagues had shared with the caption about entitled influencer behavior and the toxic culture of social media narcissism that was damaging both authentic travel experiences and local communities that dealt with these demanding visitors. The video showed Luna having an absolute emotional breakdown at PDX Airport, screaming at airline customer service representatives about ticket transfers and demanding explanations for travel arrangements that she clearly didn't understand, all while live streaming the entire incident to her Instagram followers in what appeared to be a desperate attempt to generate sympathy and portray herself as the victim of some elaborate betrayal. Her performance was both painful and revealing, showcasing the entitled behavior that I'd been enabling through months of financial support and emotional accommodation, but which became obviously problematic when directed toward airline employees who had no obligation to manage her creative temperament or validate her feelings about creative partnerships and authentic living. The live stream captured Luna demanding to speak with managers, threatening to expose the airline's customer service failures to her thousands of followers, and making increasingly dramatic claims about emotional trauma and professional sabotage that made her sound completely disconnected from the reality that she'd simply discovered her boyfriend had given her ticket to someone who actually appreciated the opportunity. Other passengers in the background could be seen recording her outburst with their phones, creating multiple angles of documentation that quickly spread across various social media platforms with commentary about influencer culture, entitled behavior, and the gap between online personas and actual character that became evident when people didn't get their way. The viral nature of Luna's breakdown attracted attention from travel industry professionals and social media critics who used her meltdown as an example of everything wrong with influencer culture and the toxic expectation that the world should accommodate creative people's emotional needs without question or boundaries. Within hours, the hashtag about her airport incident was trending with thousands of comments from people sharing their own stories about entitled influencer behavior and demanding customers who treated service workers as props in their personal dramas rather than human beings deserving basic respect and courtesy. Cole, apparently seeing an opportunity in Luna's vulnerability and public humiliation, swooped in to offer comfort and support during what he framed as an artistic crisis that required immediate creative intervention and emotional healing through authentic experiences in natural settings away from the toxic influence of corporate culture and conventional relationship expectations. He suggested an impromptu healing retreat to Joshua Tree National Park, describing the desert landscape as perfect for the kind of spiritual recovery and creative renewal that Luna needed after being betrayed by someone who clearly didn't understand her artistic vision or appreciate her commitment to authentic living and creative courage in the face of societal pressure to conform. Luna, desperate for validation and convinced that Cole's arrival represented the universe providing exactly what she needed during her darkest hour, immediately agreed to fund the entire Joshua Tree expedition using the credit cards that I was no longer available to pay off when the bills arrived at the end of the month. She booked expensive desert accommodations, high-end camping gear, and professional photography equipment rentals that would allow Cole to capture the kind of dramatic landscape imagery that would showcase their creative partnership and demonstrate their commitment to authentic artistic collaboration in one of America's most spiritually significant natural environments. The trip represented everything Luna had criticized about my planning approach: expensive, carefully researched, designed to create specific experiences rather than allowing authentic moments to unfold organically, but she apparently didn't notice the contradiction when the planning was being done in service of Cole's creative vision rather than our relationship's stability and future development. During their week in the desert, Luna documented every moment of their spiritual and creative journey, posting content about healing from toxic relationships and discovering authentic connection with someone who understood her artistic soul and supported her creative growth rather than trying to control her through financial manipulation and conventional relationship expectations that limited her potential for genuine self-expression. The posts featured dramatic desert sunrise photography, philosophical captions about finding your tribe and embracing uncertainty, and carefully staged images of Luna and Cole collaborating on artistic projects that suggested intimate creative partnership without explicitly confirming the romantic relationship that her followers were obviously meant to infer from the visual storytelling and emotional language. However, Cole's true intentions became clear immediately after their expensive desert retreat ended, when he disappeared from Luna's life as suddenly as he'd entered it, taking several pieces of her expensive camera equipment as what he described as compensation for the emotional labor he'd provided during her healing process and the creative expertise he'd contributed to elevating her brand and artistic vision during their collaboration. Within days of returning from Joshua Tree, Cole was posting couple photos with his ex-girlfriend, the same woman whose breakup had supposedly left him emotionally devastated and in need of creative healing through authentic friendship and artistic collaboration with someone who understood his temperament and professional needs. The reunion with his ex-girlfriend appeared to have been planned throughout his entire interaction with Luna, suggesting that his emotional crisis had been manufactured to create an opportunity for the expensive vacation and equipment acquisition that Luna had enthusiastically funded in her desperation to prove her loyalty and creative authenticity to someone whose approval had become more important than financial stability or personal dignity. Luna's credit cards, which had been maxed out funding Cole's healing retreat and artistic equipment needs, left her facing thousands of dollars in debt with no reliable income stream to cover the payments, especially after several travel brands dropped their partnerships with her following the viral airport incident and the negative publicity surrounding her public breakdown and entitled behavior towards service industry workers. Her blog engagement plummeted as followers began questioning her authenticity and financial responsibility, with comment sections filling up with criticism about influencer culture and the toxic behavior that online fame seemed to encourage in people who confused social media metrics with actual personal worth and professional accomplishment. Luna's campaign to win me back began 3 weeks after Zoe and I returned from Santorini, starting with manipulative apology texts that arrived at all hours as she apparently struggled with insomnia and financial anxiety in her childhood bedroom at her parents' suburban Sacramento home. The messages followed a predictable pattern of emotional manipulation, cycling through desperate remorse, angry accusations, and strategic vulnerability designed to make me feel guilty for abandoning someone during their darkest hour rather than supporting them through the kind of creative crisis that required unwavering loyalty from people who claimed to care about artistic authenticity and personal growth. Her initial texts focused on how much she missed our connection and how Cole's betrayal had opened her eyes to the difference between genuine partnership and exploitative creative collaboration, but she carefully avoided taking responsibility for the months of emotional neglect and financial exploitation that had characterized our relationship before Cole ever appeared in our lives. Instead, Luna framed her behavior as the result of temporary confusion caused by Cole's manipulation and her own artistic insecurities, suggesting that his psychological games had made her forget what truly mattered and caused her to treat me badly because she was struggling with creative identity issues that clouded her judgment about authentic relationships. When the apologetic approach failed to generate immediate forgiveness and reunion, Luna escalated to showing up at my Portland apartment building without warning, demanding that I take responsibility for what she characterized as my cruel abandonment of someone who had been vulnerable and confused rather than deliberately hurtful toward the person who had supported her dreams and creative ambitions for over a year. These confrontations, which occurred during my lunch breaks or evening walks with Zoe, revealed the entitled mindset that had always lurked beneath Luna's artistic persona. The belief that her creative temperament and emotional needs should take precedence over other people's boundaries and that anyone who truly cared about her would accommodate whatever behavior her artistic process required without complaint or expectations of reciprocal consideration. Luna enlisted her family members and mutual friends in a social media campaign designed to guilt-trip me into reconsidering our relationship, with her mother posting passive-aggressive comments about young people giving up too easily on love and her sister sharing inspirational quotes about forgiveness and second chances that were obviously directed at me despite never mentioning my name directly. The mutual friends who had witnessed Luna's gradual transformation from supportive partner to entitled creative collaborator found themselves caught in the middle of her narrative about toxic masculinity and financial abuse, with Luna claiming that my decision to take Zoe to Santorini represented a pattern of controlling behavior designed to punish her for having creative friendships and artistic ambitions that extended beyond our conventional relationship structure. Her version of events, disseminated through carefully worded social media posts and tearful conversations with anyone who would listen, portrayed me as someone who had used financial support as a tool of manipulation and control, cutting off funding the moment she showed independence and creative courage by pursuing artistic collaborations that threatened my need to be the center of her professional and emotional world. The campaign reached its crescendo at our mutual friend Marcus's vineyard wedding in Sonoma County, where Luna appeared as an uninvited guest despite having declined the original invitation months earlier when she'd been too absorbed in Cole's creative projects to commit to social obligations that didn't offer obvious content creation opportunities or networking benefits for her travel blog and influencer aspirations. I arrived at the wedding with Zoe as my official partner, both of us looking forward to celebrating Marcus's happiness while enjoying the beautiful Napa Valley setting and reconnecting with friends we hadn't seen since before my relationship with Luna had consumed so much of my social energy and emotional bandwidth with constant drama and crisis management. Luna's dramatic entrance during the cocktail hour created exactly the kind of scene she'd always been skilled at orchestrating. Approaching our group with tears in her eyes and a speech about how losing me had taught her to appreciate the kind of stability and genuine love that she'd taken for granted while chasing creative fantasies and artistic validation from people who didn't actually care about her long-term well-being or personal growth. Her performance was designed to generate sympathy from the wedding guests and pressure me into a public reconciliation that would validate her narrative about learning from mistakes and growing into someone who finally understood what authentic love and partnership actually required from both people involved in building something meaningful together. When Luna demanded a private conversation and began her familiar routine of emotional manipulation and selective memory about our relationship's actual dynamics, I found myself responding with a calmness that surprised both of us, using her own past logic against her in ways that exposed the fundamental contradiction in her current desperate appeals for forgiveness and reunion. I reminded Luna that she had specifically praised Cole's spontaneous approach to adventure and criticized my tendency to plan experiences in advance, pointing out that my decision to bring Zoe to Santorini had simply applied her stated philosophy about the value of embracing uncertainty and making space for creative partnerships that enhanced authentic living rather than limiting it through conventional relationship expectations. Her own words about the importance of following creative instincts and not being constrained by predictable relationship structures became the framework I used to explain why I'd chosen to share our anniversary trip with someone whose company I genuinely enjoyed rather than accommodating her request to include a former intimate partner in what was supposed to be a celebration of our commitment to each other. The conversation ended with Luna realizing that I was no longer the emotionally available safety net she'd counted on being able to manipulate through guilt and financial dependency, but rather someone who had learned to value his own worth and make decisions based on mutual respect and genuine compatibility rather than fear of abandonment or desperate gratitude for attention from someone who treated love as a limited resource to be rationed based on creative needs and artistic priorities. As I walked away from Luna with Zoe's hand in mine, heading back to rejoin the wedding celebration and our friends who were genuinely happy to see us together, I felt the satisfaction of someone who had finally stopped participating in his own diminishment and discovered what partnership could feel like when both people actually wanted to be there with each other. Luna's final attempt to follow us back to the reception was gently but firmly discouraged by Marcus himself, who had witnessed enough of her emotional manipulation during our relationship to understand that her presence would only create more drama and distract from his celebration, leaving her standing alone in the vineyard parking lot with the realization that she had systematically destroyed every meaningful relationship in her life through her entitled behavior and narcissistic approach to creative collaboration and authentic living.